Eva Mitchell had never believed in fate, not the kind found in fairy tales or the flickering hopes of romantic novels. But standing in the pouring rain under the awning of a second-hand bookstore in Paris, her damp sketchpad clutched against her chest, she had looked up to see a man with wild eyes and storm-soaked hair offering her the last dry spot under cover. And just like that, fate didn't feel like fantasy. It felt like him. Liam Bennett had been a whirlwind of ambition then, his mind brimming with ideas too big for his worn leather journal. A failed startup behind him, no money, no apartment, and nothing but an American passport and a stubborn belief that he would one day build something that mattered. Eva, too, had arrived in Paris with more hope than certainty, an unpaid internship in interior design and a borrowed mattress in a stranger's loft. In each other, they found not rescue, but reflection. They were both reaching, both trying, both poor and hungry and alive. They shared two-row dinners of lentil soup and borrowed Wi-Fi from cafes that only let them sit because they smiled. They danced barefoot on creaky wooden floors and stayed up until dawn, sketching dreams and rewriting failure into purpose. The world had felt full then, full of color, full of promise, full of Liam's voice whispering in the dark, "Someday, I'll give you everything you've ever wanted." And Eva, with her cheek pressed to his chest, had answered without hesitation, "You already have." That was 7 years ago now. Eva sat alone on a velvet sofa in a Manhattan penthouse overlooking the glittering skyline she once believed would mark the pinnacle of their dreams. The room was silent, but not still, the kind of silence that buzzed, that throbbed beneath the skin, that made her aware of every breath she took alone. The apartment was beautiful. Everything in it had been chosen by her, the textures, the tones, the light. Yet it felt hollow, like a showroom no longer inhabited by the life it had been built to hold. The tea in her hands had gone cold an hour ago. She didn't bother reheating it. Liam wouldn't be home before midnight. If he came at all, their company had taken Often, a AI-driven home design platform that revolutionized interior customization. Investors called them visionaries. Articles referred to them as the American power couple who started with nothing. What no one saw were the months of sleepless nights, of coffee in chipped mugs, of love welded to hardship. She remembered the warehouse office they leased in Brooklyn, how they worked 12-hour days and slept on the floor beside whiteboards and pizza boxes. She remembered Liam's laughter when they made their first sale, $199.99 for a room makeover, and how he had picked her up, spun her around, and shouted, "We're going to make it, Eva, you and me, always." But always had a funny way of ending. Now Liam came home less and less. When he did, he was distracted, distant, weary in a way she didn't know how to reach. His touch had changed, not cold, but mechanical. His eyes no longer lingered on her. Conversations became transactional. Dinners were eaten in silence. Hugs turned into nods. Eva tried to fill the void. She focused on her own work, on expanding her solo design studio, on staying busy enough not to notice the quiet. But it crept in, late at night, in the ache of the empty bed, in the sound of only one toothbrush being used in the bathroom. It came, loneliness disguised as routine. Still, she held on. She told herself it was a phase, that pressure made people retreat, that he was just tired. She reminded herself of Paris, of promises whispered in the dark, of the man who once traced love into her skin like scripture. And then, one Thursday night, he came home earlier than usual. It should have been a relief, a small triumph. Instead, when he walked into the living room, he didn't kiss her cheek or ask how her day had been. He stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders taut. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice too even. Eva looked up from the chair where she had been editing a client mood board. "About." Liam turned to her slowly. "I think we should separate." At first, she didn't move. The words landed like cold glass, shattering on the floor between them. She blinked. "What did you say?" He took a slow breath. "I want a divorce." The silence that followed was dense and unnatural, the kind that felt like grief long before tears. She rose to her feet, trying to find something in his face that would explain some hint of anger, of betrayal, of anything that would make this make sense. "Is there someone else?" she asked, not even recognizing her own voice. "No," he said too quickly. "It's not that. I can't keep pretending." "Pretending what?" she asked, her voice rising. "That we're still worth fighting for." He looked down. "That I'm still the man you think I am." Ava's breath caught. You're not even going to try to explain. After everything, his face tightened. I don't want to fight Eva. I'm tired. She stared at him, chest tight, fingers clenched. We built a life together, from scratch. We crawled out of nothing, side by side. And you're telling me you're tired? His silence screamed more than any answer could. She stepped back, as if distance might protect her. But nothing could. Finally, she whispered, "Then give me one thing." Liam looked up, wary. "What?" "One last night," she said, voice steady now. "No papers, no packing, just us. I want to remember who we were before we destroy what we are." He hesitated. She could see it, the war in his eyes, the urge to say no, to walk away clean. But after a long beat, he nodded. That night, Eva changed into an old cotton shirt of his she used to sleep in, one that still carried the faintest scent of him. She poured 2 glasses of wine and left one on the counter, untouched. Liam came out of the bedroom, quiet, almost careful. They didn't speak much. She put on a playlist they'd made together years ago, the one with their Paris songs. La Vie en Rose filled the space like a ghost. They sat on opposite ends of the couch. Eventually, she inched closer. "Do you remember the night we got our first seed funding?" she asked. "We screamed so loud, the neighbors banged on the wall." Liam smiled faintly. "You cried." "I pretended not to. You said we'd buy a house with a red door and name our dog Pixel." "I still think that was a solid name," he murmured. She laughed. Then it faded. When they went to bed, Eva lay beside him and didn't speak. She listened to his breathing, the rhythm of a man she still knew by heart. At some point, she rolled toward him, rested her head on his chest. He didn't push her away. In the early hours before dawn, she whispered, "I don't know how to stop loving you." Liam's voice was low. "I know." And then he fell asleep, pretended to. The sun rose quietly. By the time Eva opened her eyes, he was gone. The apartment didn't feel like home anymore. Not that night. It was too quiet, too sterile. The gold accent, lighting reflected off polished surfaces, casting soft halos on the white oak floor. But it couldn't warm the cold that clung to Ava's skin. She had asked for one night, just one. And now, with Liam gone all day and the sky bleeding into dusk, she wondered if he'd changed his mind. But then the front door opened. Liam stepped inside, the collar of his coat damp with March rain, his eyes hollow but alert. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her like he wasn't sure if this was a mistake or a necessary cruelty. Eva stood from the couch, her heart heavy in her chest. "You came." He gave a short nod. "You asked." She wanted to run to him, to wrap her arms around his waist and bury her face in the fabric of his shirt, like she used to do when the world felt too loud. But that version of them had eroded over time, and now even standing close felt foreign. "I ordered dinner," she said, gesturing to the kitchen island where 2 plates sat under linen covers. "Thai, your favorite." Still, he offered a tight smile. "Thanks." They sat across from each other at the island, the silence thick. She watched him pick at the rice with his fork, barely eating, and suddenly every meal they'd shared flashed before her eyes. The ones on fire escapes, at client meetings, on the hood of their beat-up car in Brooklyn. She remembered how he used to say she made everything taste better, just by being near. Now he barely looked at her. Eva broke the silence first. "Do you remember Paris? That night the power went out, and we lit every candle we owned." Liam looked. Up there was a flicker of something in his eyes, memory, maybe even longing. "You spilled red wax all over the sheets, and you said it looked like a crime scene." He let out a soft chuckle, a real one. It was the first sound of life from him in weeks, and it hit her like a current, both comfort and pain. "I remember," he said. "That night we talked about everything. We said if we ever made it, like, really made it, we'd never forget what it took." Eva set down her fork, her appetite gone. "But we did forget, didn't we?" Liam didn't answer. He didn't need to. After dinner, they drifted into the living room. The couch still held the shape of their shared lives, even if they hadn't sat close on it in months. Eva picked up the remote, scrolled to an old playlist from their first year together, and pressed play. A soft acoustic melody filled the room. She sat at one end of the couch. Liam took the other. They sipped wine. She didn't know what she was hoping for, a confessional, a change of heart, maybe just a moment where they could step outside the wreckage and remember what the foundation looked like before the cracks. "Why now?" she asked gently. "Why tonight, after everything?" Liam stared at the skyline, the way it flickered in their window like it belonged to another world. Because I don't want us to hate each other. I don't want to wake up one day and realize we turned into people we never meant to be. Ava's voice was calm, but laced with hurt. You don't think we're already there? He looked at her then, fully, like he hadn't in weeks. No, but we're close. She nodded, letting the silence settle before she asked the question that had haunted her since the words, "I want a divorce," first left his lips. Is it really because you've stopped loving me? Liam flinched almost imperceptibly. Eva, please, she said. Just tell me the truth. I'm not afraid of it anymore. He closed his eyes. It's not about love. Then what is it? He rubbed a hand over his jaw, tired. It's about what love costs. She frowned. What does that even mean? It means I don't know how to be the man you deserve anymore. I don't sleep. I can't breathe without this voice in my head reminding me of every time I've failed. And I keep thinking, if I let go now, maybe you'll be free to find something better, someone better. Ava's voice broke. But I didn't ask for someone better. I asked for you. I chose you. Every day I've chosen you even when it hurt. Liam's throat worked as he swallowed. And that's exactly why I can't keep taking from you. The tears came suddenly, uninvited. Eva didn't try to stop them. You think this is mercy, abandoning me before I can fall apart? I think, Liam said quietly, this is the only way I know how to protect you from me. They sat there, in silence, the song looping back to the beginning, filling the air with bittersweet nostalgia. Outside, the rain began again, soft against the glass. Eventually, Eva reached for the wine bottle and poured them both another glass. I want to remember this, she said. Tonight, yes, I want to remember the end not as something that broke me, but something I walked through with grace, with truth. He didn't argue, he just nodded. The hours passed, they talked. Not about the future, or about lawyers, or who would take what they talked about. Nothing movies they used to love, bad hotel rooms they survived, the weird sounds their old radiator made back in Brooklyn. As the clock neared midnight, Eva stood and crossed the room. She paused in front of him, the lamplight casting gold against her cheekbones. Dance with me, she whispered. He hesitated, then rose. She stepped into his arms. They swayed gently, barely moving, their bodies falling into the muscle memory of closeness. She rested her head against his chest, and for a moment, she could almost forget everything. Do you still remember how we met? She asked. In the rain, he murmured, outside a bookstore. And you offered me your umbrella. I didn't have an umbrella, he said, a small smile forming. I just stood next to you and pretended. She laughed, her breath catching on the edge of a sob. You always did find your way into things. Liam's hand tightened around hers. Eva, I never wanted to lose you. Then why are you letting me go? He didn't answer, because he couldn't. They didn't sleep that night, not in the way people usually meant it. They lay side by side, fully clothed, fingers loosely intertwined. At one point, Eva turned to face him and asked, if things were different, would you still choose me? His voice was barely a whisper. In every lifetime. And then morning came. The light crept across the floor slowly, illuminating the room like a secret being revealed. Liam stood before she woke. He took one last look at her curled under the blanket, hand still resting where his chest had been. He bent down, kissed her forehead, and walked out the door. No note, no goodbyes, just absence. Eva woke to the echo of the closing door. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, unmoving. Then, slowly, she reached for his pillow, pulled it close, and allowed herself the collapse. That day, the sun rose on a city that didn't know how much she'd lost. And yet, in the quiet, something fragile remained. Not hope, exactly, not yet, but the memory of love. The shape of it, the fact that once had been real enough to touch, and maybe somewhere down the line that would be enough to start over. The apartment was quiet, but not with peace. It was the kind of quiet that unsettled, too still, too perfect, too untouched, the kind that followed storms and lingered long after the damage was done. Eva walked barefoot across the polished floors of the penthouse, trailing her fingertips along the edge of the marble countertop, her heart heavy beneath the weight of invisible things. Days had passed since Liam left. No messages, no emails, no updates. Just that one night, one last moment, suspended in time, now silence. Thick and dense and endless. She moved like someone learning to live without gravity. Everything she did, pouring tea, turning off the alarm, stepping into the shower, was mechanical. Her body remembered what routine demanded, but her soul lagged behind, searching for a presence that was no longer there in the kitchen. She opened a drawer without thinking and found one of his old pencils, blue-capped, always leaking just slightly near the tip. She held it in her palm for a long moment, like it might still carry some trace of warmth. Even in his absence, Liam was everywhere. His cologne still lingered faintly on the towel rack. His favorite whiskey, untouched, sat at the back of the cabinet. The closet, half empty now, looked like a missing tooth, gapingly obvious, impossible to ignore. Eva found herself standing in front of their bed most nights, unable to get in. She slept, curled on the couch, with the throw blanket he once draped over her shoulders, without asking. She missed things she never realized she noticed. The sound of his key turning in the lock, the way he muttered to himself while brushing his teeth, the uneven beat of his heart when she lay with her head on his chest. What broke her most wasn't the loneliness, it was the confusion, the unanswered questions. Liam hadn't left her with rage or even regret. He had left with a look in his eyes that still haunted her, sorrow laced with love, like he was mourning something he wasn't ready to bury. One afternoon, a week after his departure, Eva began packing, not because she wanted to leave, but because she couldn't breathe. The apartment had become a museum of memories, too fragile, too loud. Every corner was steeped in stories, in echoes, in almost. She opened drawers and found photographs from their first business trip. She pulled open the linen closet and discovered a birthday card she had forgotten to give him. Still sealed, still hopeful. She worked slowly, folding away their life piece by piece. Her movements were precise, almost reverent, as though she were packing not clothes, but pieces of herself. She labeled boxes living room, studio, storage, though what she really wanted to write was once, and ours, and broken. She left the office for last. It had always been Liam's sanctuary. He'd spent hours in there, sketching algorithms on the whiteboard, pacing during investor calls, sipping black coffee as he mapped out a future neither of them had expected to come true so fast. Eva paused at the threshold. The door was ajar. That in itself was odd. Liam never left it open. Inside, the air was stale with disuse. The blinds were partially drawn, casting long bars of light across the floor. His desk stood exactly as he'd left it, neat, purposeful, untouched, except for one drawer. It was cracked open slightly, just enough to draw the eye, just enough to feel like an invitation. Eva stared at it, her breath catching. She knew Liam. He never left drawers ajar, especially not that one. The hesitation lasted less than a second. Her hand moved before her mind could intervene. She knelt and pulled the drawer open. Inside was a single manila folder, thick, worn at the edges. Her name was not on it, but another one was. Camille Dupont. Eva's hands went cold. Her vision narrowed. She hadn't thought of Camille in years. She had been a name from Liam's past, Paris's old wounds, nothing more. Or so she believed. She opened the folder. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Letters, typed and signed. Emails printed out in bold, sharp font. Wire transfer requests, threats, blackmail. Legal language laced with venom. Eva scanned each line, her eyes widening, her fingers trembling. The demands were clear. A large sum of money. A list of documents, confidential files, threats to expose business dealings, to contact federal authorities, to destroy not only the company but Liam himself. Her heart pounded. She read again, slower this time. The accusations were tied to transactions from years ago, right before their company had taken off. Paper trails, NDA breaches, something about a patent filed in Liam's name that had originated in a Project Camille, had helped fund. And then the final message. One page, no signature. Pay me, or I'll burn down everything you've built. Starting with her. Eva dropped the page. The weight of it hit her all at once. This was why Liam had changed. Why he had pulled away. Why he had looked at her like a man, drowning but unwilling to drag her under. He hadn't stopped loving her. He had been trying to save her. She sank onto the floor, the folder still open in her lap, her vision blurred with tears. All this time, she had thought he had grown cold, that he had given up on them, that maybe she had failed to hold their life together. But the truth was worse, and somehow more devastating. Liam had been suffering in silence, and she had been too proud, too afraid, to demand the truth. Eva sat there for a long time, her back against the bookshelf, the city glowing behind her in the distance like a world that no longer made sense. When her hands stopped shaking, she gathered the documents, sealed them back in the folder, and pressed it against her chest. She couldn't fix what had already shattered, but she could understand it, and maybe she could still reach him. That night, she walked through every room of their apartment one last time. She touched the places where they had laughed, argued, kissed. She paused at the bookshelf where they kept their first business plan. She lingered at the windowsill where he once surprised her with flowers and whispered apologies that still echoed in her skin. She placed the folder in her bag and stood in front of the mirror. Her face looked different now, older maybe, or just stripped bare, but her eyes still held something she refused to name. Not hope, not yet. Resolve. The next morning Eva left the apartment, not to run, but to find him. To find the man who had tried to protect her by breaking her heart, to find the truth they had buried in silence, and maybe, just maybe, to offer him a different ending than the one he had written alone. Liam Bennett had always believed that certain truths could be buried, smoothed over like sand beneath the tide. But in the end, the tide always pulled back. He remembered the moment everything shifted 2 months before he left Eva. On an evening that should have been ordinary, they were in the kitchen, laughing, cooking together. It had been one of those rare nights when time had softened between them. She was chopping basil, humming to a song on the radio, sunlight spilling over her shoulders like a blessing. His phone buzzed once. A name appeared he hadn't seen in years. Camille Dupont. For a split second, Liam stared at it, the hum in the room vanishing into static. He tucked the phone away, forced a smile, and returned to the stove. But something inside him began to crack. That text was the beginning of the unraveling. The next day, he received the first letter, typed, signed, calculated. She had documentation from the early years, financial records, proof of a patent he had registered under his name with her original design as a core component. He had taken a risk back then. Camille had offered him funding with vague terms. At the time, he was desperate, naive, convinced he could build something honest out of a shaky foundation. But Camille had waited, and now, she had returned. Her terms were brutal. Pay her millions to stay silent, or watch as she dragged his name and Avias through the mud. Liam spent nights in the office, pretending to work, poring over her letters instead. Every demand was a thread pulling at the fabric of his life. He knew the implications. He knew if the press got hold of it, if the federal authorities looked deeper, his entire company could collapse. Investors would flee, his name would be smeared, and even their shared legacy would be caught in the wreckage. At first, he thought he could fix it. He met with lawyers. They warned him the case wasn't airtight. Too much could be twisted. Camille had kept every receipt, every transaction. Liam could argue breach of contract, but it would be ugly, public, prolonged. He thought about telling Eva so many nights. He lay beside her, watching the curve of her cheek, the slow rise and fall of her breath, and opened his mouth then shut it again. How could he tell her? How could he confess that everything they had built might have been built on a lie, and worse, that lie had his name on it? Eva believed in truth, in goodness, in the quiet kind of integrity that built homes and healed wounds. She had trusted him not just with her love, but with her future, and he had failed her before he ever became worthy of it. So Liam made a decision. If Camille was going to burn down his life, then let her burn his, but not Eva's. He wouldn't let her be dragged through years of lawsuits, headlines, courtrooms. He wouldn't let her walk into restaurants and see her name next to words like scandal or fraud. He wouldn't see the light in her eyes dim under the weight of his mistakes. He would leave. Quietly, he would give her a clean break, one she could hate him for if she needed to. It would be easier that way. It had to be. The night he told her, the night she asked for one more evening together, he had already signed the initial papers for his confession. He'd left instructions with his attorney. He had emptied his shares, transferred partial ownership of the company to her, protected what he could, but the cost was unbearable. He never forgot the look in her eyes that night. Not anger, not rage, just heartbreak, and something else, faith. The kind that doesn't question, even in silence. The kind that made him want to collapse and confess everything right then and there. But he couldn't. He didn't trust himself to be strong if she begged him to stay. So he left before the sun rose, before he could hear her say his name one more time and forget why he was doing this. And now, weeks later, Liam stood in a cold grey office at the Department of Justice, signing away his freedom. The prosecutor didn't flinch. She had no reason to. To her, he was just another man who made a bad decision and came to face it too late. "You understand the consequences of these statements?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Once we proceed, there will be no reversal." "I know." His attorney stood beside him, silent. They had discussed everything. 5 years, maybe less, with good behavior. No headlines, if they kept it sealed. Camille had taken a settlement in exchange for limited exposure. She wanted her money, not the destruction. Liam had given it. It was the only way he could buy Eva peace. When the meeting ended, Liam walked outside and stood beneath the city sky. It was winter, light grey, brittle, offering no warmth. He buttoned his coat and walked with purpose, not because he had somewhere to be, but because movement was all he had left. He thought of Eva constantly, not just her laugh or her scent, or the way she drank her coffee slowly in the morning, but the small things, the way she scribbled notes on her wrist, the way she hummed when nervous, the way she believed in people long after they gave her reason not to. He wondered what she thought of him now, if she hated him, if she cried, if she still reached for his side of the bed out of habit. He had written her a letter before his arrest, folded it carefully, left it on his desk in case she ever came looking. It was the only confession he could offer, the only piece of himself he had left to give without destroying her. "Eva, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've made mistakes, big ones, ones that could hurt you if I stayed. I've done what I can to keep you safe. You may never forgive me, and that's okay. But I need you to live. Live for the things we dreamed about. Keep building beauty. Keep loving honestly. You were never the mistake. You were always the reason I kept trying to be better. Please don't wait for me. Don't carry my name like a wound. With everything I have left." Liam. That night, Liam checked into a temporary holding facility to await transfer. The cell was clean, sterile, too bright. The silence was different here, not heavy with memories like home, but empty with finality. He lay on the cot staring at the ceiling. No more apartments with sunlit windows, no more company meetings or client pictures. No more Eva. And yet, he felt strangely still. There was clarity in sacrifice, in surrender. This was the price. And maybe, just maybe, she'd be free now. He closed his eyes and imagined her walking through Central Park again, her coat fluttering in the wind, her cheeks flushed with cold. He imagined her laughing with a friend, sipping wine at a rooftop bar, redesigning a space with colors she loved. He imagined her whole again. He imagined her forgetting him. But somewhere, deep beneath the layers of grief and guilt, a part of him, and stubborn, still hoped she wouldn't, still hoped she would come back one day, even if it was just to tell him that she had survived without him, and even if he never saw her again, even if she moved on, even if she loved someone else. He would carry her in the quiet, because once, when he had nothing, she had given him everything, and that kind of love never really leaves, it only waits. Eva didn't sleep that night. Not really. After finding the folder buried in Liam's desk, the truth had begun to shift the world beneath her feet. At first, it had felt like a bit of secrets he had kept, decisions he had made without her. But as she read the documents a second, then a third time, the contours of Liam's silence began to change. It hadn't been driven by malice or indifference. It had been an act of protection, a sacrifice. And now he was gone. She didn't know where he had gone, but the weight of what he had done for her pressed on her chest like a stone she couldn't move. He had tried to shield her from the fallout of a decision he had made long before their lives became something worth protecting. He had walked away not because he didn't love her, but because he did. That morning, she went to his office. The receptionist looked up with a gentle smile that faltered when she recognized Eva's expression somewhere between desperation and grief. "I'm looking for Liam," Eva said softly. The woman hesitated. He resigned 2 weeks ago." Eva felt the air thin around her. "Do you know where he went?" "He left this," the receptionist said, reaching beneath the desk. "He said to give it to you, if you ever came." She handed Eva a sealed envelope. Her name, written in Liam's careful, slanted handwriting, was scrawled across the front. Eva took it with trembling fingers and nodded in thanks. Her voice caught somewhere behind her ribs. She walked back to the car and sat there with the envelope in her lap for a long time, watching the city move around her in a blur. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the paper like it might dissolve if she opened it too quickly. But eventually, she slipped her nail under the seal and pulled out the letter. Eva, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've thought for weeks about how to say goodbye to you, and nothing has come close to the weight of what I feel. You deserve the truth. You always have. There are things I did in the past before us that are now coming back for me, and I couldn't bear the thought of you standing in the fire for something I lit. So I made the choice to step away, to protect you, even if it meant breaking both of us in the process. I need you to live, Eva. I need you to keep creating, keep building, keep laughing. Please, don't wait for me. You're meant for more than waiting. But if some part of you still carries me, know that I never stopped loving you, even now, especially now. Liam. Eva finished the letter, her breath catching on every line, and then read it again. Her tears came in waves, grief mingled with fury, longing interlaced with understanding. She could see him now, signing the pages in some dim office, watching the ink dry on the decisions that would carry him away from her. How long had he been planning this? How many nights had he laid next to her, already gone in his heart? She didn't remember driving to his apartment. She didn't remember talking, but suddenly, she was there, standing in the foyer, her hand fumbling with the spare key he had never asked her to return. The door creaked open. Darkness met her. Silence. The place felt abandoned, like a life paused mid-sentence. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning for any sign of him, his coat on the rack, his shoes by the door. But the apartment was bare, except for the wooden table in the middle of the room. On it, another letter, this one folded in half and left without an envelope. Her hands shook as she picked it up. Clara, if you're here, it means you didn't listen. It means you're still trying to find me, even when I asked you not to. But I can't pretend I didn't hope you would. I turned myself in today. The case will be handled quietly. My sentence won't be short, but it will be just. You always said the truth matters. So here it is. I was wrong to keep this from you. I was wrong to decide for both of us, but I never once doubted your strength. I'm letting go so you can live free of my mistakes. I'm sorry. I won't be there to see the rest of your story. You were the best part of mine. Liam. This time, the sob that tore from her chest was deep. She sank to her knees, the paper crumpling in her hand as she pressed her palm to her heart, as if to hold it together. He was gone, not just left. Gone. Turned himself in, facing prison, for her, and she had been too late. Eva didn't wait. She ran. She ran, hailed the nearest cab and gave the driver the name of the nearest federal detention center, her voice barely coherent. The drive felt eternal, her mind a blur of thoughts and images. His hands on her back, his laughter in the kitchen, the way he whispered her name when the world got quiet. She replayed their last night together and realized, with a sudden ache, that he had already known then. He had already decided. He had said goodbye without saying the word. When she reached the station, she stumbled through the lobby, her legs unsteady, her heart hammering. I need to know if Liam Bennett is here, she said, her voice raw. The officer behind the counter gave her a look full of quiet sympathy. He turned himself in earlier today. He's already in holding. I'm sorry. You're too late. The words landed like a verdict. Too late. Eva stood frozen in the middle of the sterile room, surrounded by unfamiliar faces and buzzing lights. Her breath came in short bursts. She covered her mouth with both hands to muffle the sob that escaped. Too late. She had waited too long to ask the questions she had been afraid of. She had let silence build between them until it became a wall he could hide behind, and now there was no undoing it. No time left for words unsaid, but even in the wreckage, something rose inside her. Not defeat, not surrender, determination. Liam had made his choice, but she hadn't made hers yet. A few days later, she sat in the visitation room of the correctional center, her fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee she couldn't drink. The air smelled like bleach and old carpet. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Then the door creaked open. Liam entered in plain clothes, his posture stiff, his face drawn. He looked older, not by years but by miles. He stopped when he saw her for a moment. Neither of them moved. Then she stood, crossed the room, and reached for his face. He flinched. You shouldn't be here, he said hoarsely. She shook her head. You don't get to decide that. I told you not to wait, and I didn't, she replied. I ran. He tried to look away, but she held his gaze. You gave up your freedom for me, she said. But did it ever occur to you that I would have chosen to walk through it with you? That I would have stood beside you if you had let me. Liam's eyes filled with unshed tears. I couldn't ask you to carry that. You didn't ask. You decided. And I'm telling you now, I'm not leaving. I don't care how long this takes, I'll be here. Liam lowered his head, his voice breaking. You don't know what that means. I do, she said. It means love. The kind that doesn't disappear when things fall apart. He reached across the table and took her hands in his. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Eva. She pressed her forehead to his and breathed in the scent of him, the nearness of him. I forgive you, she whispered. But when this is over, when you come home, you have to promise me something. Anything. You don't walk away again. No more protecting me by disappearing. You fight with me. Side by side. Always. His grip tightened, his breath shaking. I promise. And in that moment, surrounded by sterile walls and fluorescent lights, they made a vow far stronger than any wedding could offer. They chose each other, not because it was easy, but because love, real love, survives even the hardest truths, and sometimes it waits. Spring arrived quietly that year, slipping into New York with the gentleness of someone afraid to knock. The air warmed in hesitant bursts, the cherry trees lining the streets of the Upper West Side beginning to blush with petals, though Eva hardly noticed. Time had fractured into something fluid and unfamiliar. The days passed slowly now, marked, not by meetings or projects or client calls, but by letters folded, handwritten, and read 100 times over. 2 months had passed since Liam's sentencing. He was serving time in a federal facility upstate, a place as sterile and grey as the silence he once left behind. The courtroom had been private, no reporters, no cameras, just a judge, a file of documentation, and Eva in the back row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying not to fall apart. He had pleaded guilty without defense. He hadn't tried to justify his past or protect his future. He had simply told the truth. 5 years, the gavel fell, and in that instant, her world splintered into before and after. Since then, Eva had tried to keep moving. She returned to her design firm, though her office now felt like a museum to a life paused. She spoke only when necessary, worked only when required. The nights were worse. Sleep came slowly, then not at all. The bed still held Liam's shape, and though his scent had faded from the sheets, her body remembered the absence. And then, one quiet morning, the nausea began. At first, she dismissed it. Stress, probably. Her appetite had been unpredictable, her sleep disrupted. But as the days wore on, her body shifted in ways she couldn't ignore. She stood in the bathroom one morning, staring at herself in the mirror, her skin pale, her pulse quick, and whispered the thought aloud as if it might vanish. If she gave it voice, no. But the pharmacy test said otherwise. 2 pink lines, stark, unforgiving. True. Eva sat on the bathroom floor, her knees pulled up to her chest, the test resting beside her on the tile like a witness. She closed her eyes and let the silence wash over her, let the realization settle in her bones. She was pregnant, with Liam's child. For a long time she didn't move. She just breathed, slowly, deliberately, one inhale at a time, and when she stood, she knew 2 things with absolute certainty. She would keep the baby, and she wouldn't tell Liam, not yet. He had enough to carry. He was already buried beneath guilt and regret. She couldn't hand him this news like another stone. He needed to survive where he was, to keep moving through his sentence, without the weight of wondering what he was missing. She would hold this quietly. For now. Eva changed everything after that. She started eating again. She went back to prenatal yoga quiet morning classes, where no one knew her, where she could move without explanation. She filled her fridge with fruit and ginger tea. She called her doctor. She marked the calendar in soft pencil. And at night, she wrote him. She sent a letter each week handwritten on linen paper. Never long, but always honest. She told him about her work, about the new mural in the subway station that made her pause and cry without knowing why, about how the neighbor's dog kept barking through the walls, about the way spring light made everything feel possible again. But she never told him about the baby in his letters back. Liam was brief, careful. His handwriting had grown tighter, more controlled. He asked how she was sleeping, if she was eating. Well, he told her he missed her without ever saying the words. There were things they both left unsaid. One night, Eva stood in the nursery, the one she had once imagined for later, and stared at the empty walls. She had never thought she would be decorating this room alone, but she didn't feel alone, not exactly. Her hand rested on the small curve of her belly. She was only 12 weeks along, but already she could feel the difference. In her energy, in her stillness, she whispered into the quiet, as if the baby could hear her. "You're not an accident. You're a gift, even if the world isn't ready yet." And slowly, she began to build something new. Each week, she bought one small item for the baby: a stuffed giraffe, a cotton onesie, a book of poems. She stacked them in a chest at the end of her bed, a secret growing between her and the future. When she was ready, she told a few close friends. Her assistant wept in the hallway. Her best friend from college brought her homemade soup and herbal tea. People offered help, advice, stories, but no one offered judgment. They saw the strength in her choice, even if she didn't. Months passed. Her body changed. Her walk shifted. The baby kicked for the first time one July morning as she sat on the balcony with a mug of peppermint tea, and her feet propped on the railing. The movement startled her aflutter, like wings beating just beneath her skin. She laughed aloud, then cried into her hands. Liam would have loved this, but she didn't write to tell him. Instead, she wrote about the weather, about how Central Park smelled like grass and fresh rain, about a new design client who wanted a nursery that looked like a forest. She included sketches inked by hand, the trees curling at the corners of the page, soft as dreams. He responded with gratitude, sometimes just one paragraph, but always, at the end, a signature she could feel. Through the paper, "Love, Liam." Shea read those words over and over. The world spun quietly toward fall. The baby grew stronger, and with every kick, every twist beneath her ribs, Eva felt herself tethered to something steady again. She didn't pretend it was easy. There were nights when she lay curled in bed, weeping into a pillow, when her back ached and she wanted to scream at the injustice of raising a child alone while the father sat behind walls he had walked into willingly. There were moments she resented Liam, resented his silence, his choices, but then she would remember what he had done for her. He had loved her enough to walk away. Now it was her turn to stay. She kept every letter he sent in a wooden box beside the crib. One day, she would tell their child the whole story, not just the beautiful parts, the real ones, the choices, the mistakes, the strength it took to begin again. Because this wasn't a story about abandonment, it was a story about love, complicated, imperfect, but enduring. And as her belly rounded, as the baby grew heavy inside her, Eva held that truth close. Liam was gone, but their love, in all its brokenness and courage, remained, not just in the past, but now, alive, kicking, waiting. The gates opened just after dawn. The metal groaned against the silence, rising slowly with the weight of what had held back for too long. The sun hovered low over the horizon, casting the faintest gold across the earth, as if the morning itself understood the moment and was gentle with it. Liam Bennett stood on the other side, shoulders leaner, eyes shadowed by time, wearing the same clothes he had entered in 5 years before. They no longer fit the man he had become. He stepped forward, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes, and inhaled a breath so deep it ached. Freedom didn't feel like he'd imagined it. It wasn't overwhelming or euphoric. It was quiet, sobering, a fragile kind of weight, one that came with knowing what had been lost. He hadn't expected anyone to be waiting. That had been the condition he made with himself. No hopes, no reunions, no grand gestures. He would walk out alone and begin again, whatever that meant. But as he stepped onto the sidewalk, he saw her. Eva stood just a few feet away, framed by the soft pink haze of morning, wearing a pale coat buttoned at the waist, her hair pulled back, her face both familiar and unfamiliar. Her expression was unreadable, calm, composed, yet filled with something he didn't yet know how to name. Beside her stood a small boy. He couldn't have been more than 4 years old, dressed in a navy sweater and corduroy pants, a tiny backpack slung over one shoulder, and a mop of dark curls that caught the light like copper threads. Liam stopped walking. The boy clutched Ava's hand. She bent down and whispered something in his ear. Then they started moving toward him, step by step, until all three stood within arm's reach. Liam looked at her, unsure whether to speak. Eva broke the silence first. "This is Noah," she said softly. "He's your son." The world tilted. Everything inside Liam collapsed inward, then slowly unfolded like breath. He knelt down, his body trembling. Noah stared at him with curious eyes, green-gray, like Ava's, framed by lashes that matched his own. He wasn't afraid, just watchful. "Still, my son," Liam whispered. The words cracked in his throat. Noah tilted his head, then stepped forward and touched Liam's cheek with one small hand. "Hi," he said. Liam's hands lifted, as if uncertain they had the right to hold him. But then Noah wrapped his arms around Liam's neck and said, as if it had always been true, "Daddy." Liam broke. Tears spilled down his face in quiet surrender. He wrapped his arms around the boy and held him close, breathing in the scent of warm skin and apple shampoo and everything he had feared he would never have again, his son, his flesh, his beginning. Eva stood behind them, her face turned slightly away. When Liam looked up at her, he saw her blinking fast, her chin trembling, stood slowly, still holding Noah's hand. "You didn't tell me. I couldn't," she said. "Not then. You were already carrying too much. I wanted you to come back proud, not buried in guilt." He searched her face. How did you raise him all these years without me?" "By waking up," she replied, "every day and choosing not to break. I had help. I had love. I had him." He looked at his son again, then back at her. "You gave him everything." She shook her head. "We did. I just carried it for both of us until now. There was so much to say. Too much. So he said the only thing that mattered. Thank you for not giving up." Eva stepped forward and reached for his hand. "Let's go home." They didn't talk much on the drive. Noah dozed in the back seat, his head tilted against the window. Liam kept glancing at him through the mirror, as if afraid the boy might vanish. Eva drove steadily, her fingers resting lightly on the wheel, her expression unreadable but calm. When they reached her home, Liam stepped out slowly. The house was small, nestled on a quiet street in Beacon, surrounded by trees that whispered in the morning breeze. There was a porch with 2 chairs and a wind chime that danced in the air. Noah woke and clambered out of the car, running up the steps ahead of them. Liam stood at the edge of the yard, taking it in. "You live here?" he asked. Eva nodded. "We've been here for 3 years. It's quiet, good schools, the kind of place where people smile when they see you walk past." Liam looked around. "It's beautiful." "It's ours," she said. "If you want it to be." He turned to her, something in his throat tightening. "Eva, I don't know if I deserve this. I don't even know how to begin making it right." "You start by showing up," she said gently, "by being present. Not perfect." He hesitated. "Do you really think I can be a father? After everything?" "You already are one," she replied. "You just haven't had the chance to grow into it yet." That night, they sat on the porch after Noah had gone to bed, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea in silence. The stars stretched across the sky, quiet and constant. Liam turned to her. "There were nights I thought I'd never see you again. I thought you'd move on, that you should." Eva smiled faintly. "There were nights I thought I might, but I didn't." "Why not?" She looked at him, her eyes soft. "Because I never stopped believing that underneath the silence and the fear, you were still the man I met in Paris, the one who offered me shelter in the rain when he had none himself. I was just waiting for him to find his way back." Liam closed his eyes. "I missed so much." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "But you're here now." And for the first time in years, he believed that might be enough. The next morning Noah ran into the bedroom, where Liam was sleeping, and leaped onto the bed with the unfiltered joy only children can carry. Liam laughed and pulled him close, letting the moment fill every hollow place inside him. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real, and sometimes the return mattered more than the road it took to get there. It began with small things. A toothbrush Liam left beside Ava's, a note on the fridge that said "breakfast on me," scribbled in his barely legible hand, a pile of books on fatherhood borrowed from the local library, worn pages highlighted, corners dog-eared. The adjustment wasn't seamless. Nothing meaningful ever was. Liam had returned to a world already in motion. Eva and Noah had built a rhythm over 5 years, one of bedtime stories, morning pancakes, and weekend visits to the botanical garden. Liam stood at the edges of that rhythm at first, unsure how to step into a dance he hadn't been part of from the start, but slowly, the spaces opened for him. He learned that Noah liked his sandwiches cut into stars, not triangles, that Eva hummed when she watered the plants, never quite in tune, that Saturday mornings were for market runs, and Friday nights were for popcorn and movies, and that the bedtime routine included a story, a song, and 3 kisses no more. no less. Liam stumbled, more often than he liked. He overcooked eggs. He bought the wrong toothpaste. He forgot Noah's snack on the first day of pre-K and arrived at pickup 10 minutes late, breathless and apologetic. But Noah forgave easily, and Eva forgave quietly. One night, after Noah had fallen asleep with his toy fire truck clutched in one hand, Liam sat on the porch steps, his head in his hands. Eva joined him, 2 mugs of tea in hand, the air crisp with early autumn. "I'm trying," he said, "but I keep feeling like I'm late to my own life." She didn't rush to answer. She just let the silence breathe between them before speaking. Softly, "You're not late, you're just healing." He looked at her, weary and wide open. "I'm afraid I'll never be enough." She reached over, her fingers brushing his. "You already are. Maybe not in the ways you imagined, but in the ways that matter." There was something in her voice that reminded him of the first time they met, when she had seen past his ambition and charm, and found the part of him that ached to be understood. Liam began volunteering at a non-profit in the city, coding and business fundamentals to formerly incarcerated men and women. He never spoke about his past in detail, but he didn't hide it either. The young men listened to him differently, not like a savior, but like someone who had survived something familiar. Eva watched him begin to stand taller again, not as the man he had been before prison, but as someone truer, less polished, more grounded, and far more real. At home, Noah became his guide. The boy dragged him through muddy parks and finger paint disasters, introduced him to dinosaur trivia, and made him attend every school parent day, no exceptions. Liam fumbled, often, but Noah never seemed to mind. He didn't ask for perfection, only presence. And Liam, to his own surprise, found that presence changed him. He learned to listen, really listen, when Noah talked about feelings. He learned to ask Eva about her day before offering a solution. He learned to apologize without defense, and to stay even when the conversations got hard. One Sunday morning, Liam found himself watching Eva from across the kitchen. She was laughing at something Noah had said, her face flushed with sunlight, a streak of flour on her cheek. There was no music playing, no drama unfolding, just the soft hum of life. He walked over, brushed the flour from her cheek, and kissed her like a man who had finally stopped running from himself. Later that evening, as they curled on the couch after Noah had gone to bed, he whispered against her hair, "I want to marry you again. But this time, not because we built a company together, not to survive scandal or hide truth, just because I love you." Eva didn't answer immediately. Her hand found his dot, and then, quietly, "I thought I'd never hear you say that again. I mean it." She turned to him, eyes full. "Then ask me again, properly, when the moment is right, and I promise I'll say yes." He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "I'll spend every day earning it." The days passed, weaving something solid between them. They redecorated the nursery into a big kid room. Liam planted a tree in the backyard. With Noah, a small red maple they named Hope. Eva returned to painting in the evenings. Her studio filled once again with color and quiet music. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was a true one. And as the first snow fell gently across the backyard that winter, Liam stood at the window, his arms wrapped around Eva, their son building a crooked snowman beneath the branches of the tree they planted together. He had once believed he was too broken to be loved again, but love had never asked for perfection. Only truth. Only return. Only presence. And now, wrapped in warmth, in laughter, in the kind of quiet joy that only comes after surviving the storm, Liam knew he was home. It was spring again, the kind that made everything feel born anew. Crocuses pushed their way through thawing soil in Ava's garden, and robins built nests in the maple tree Liam and Noah had planted. The air was tinged with something hopeful, like forgiveness hanging in bloom. Liam stood in the mirror of their bedroom, adjusting the collar of his white shirt. His fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of the day. Today wasn't just about ceremony, it was about redemption. About reclaiming something he had once let go. From the hallway, Noah called out, "Dad, are you ready? Yet Mom's gonna beat us there." Liam smiled and turned. His son stood in a small navy suit, his tie crooked, his eyes bright. The boy had grown taller in the past year, his voice surer, his laugh louder. He was Liam's anchor now, his compass, and today he'd be standing at his father's side, not as a witness to a mistake, but to a promise. "I'm ready," Liam said, his voice soft. Let's go bring her home. They met Eva in the conservatory at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. She stood beneath a canopy of wisteria, her dress pale as the sky just before sunrise. No veil, number, pretense, just her, radiant and real, as Liam had always known her. There were no guests, no media, just a small circle: her sister, his mentor from the non-profit, and a few friends who had walked with them through the fire. The officiant waited quietly, allowing the moment to breathe. When Liam reached her, he didn't speak right away. He took in her eyes, the way they held centuries in a single glance, the strength behind her smile. And then, as the world hushed around them, he reached for her hands and spoke. I've walked through shadows I never thought I'd escape. I've hurt you in ways I can never erase. But through it all, you never stopped believing in who I could be. You held hope for both of us when I had none. I don't stand here today as a perfect man, but I stand here whole, because of you. I promise you my truth, my presence, my growth. For every day we have left. Eva blinked, but didn't cry. Instead, her voice was steady, certain. You once said I saved you, but Liam, you saved yourself. You chose honesty when silence would have been easier. You chose growth when shame begged you to give up. You've taught me what it means to fight for love, not with grand gestures, but with every small, consistent act. I promise to keep choosing you, not the man you were, but the man you are now. Noah stood between them, grinning, holding a ring box. Liam crouched and took it from him, pulling the boy into a quick hug before rising again. As they exchanged rings, the wind caught in the trees, scattering petals across the grass like confetti. There was no applause, just a stillness, sacred and full. Afterward, they walked through the garden as a family. Noah darted ahead, chasing a butterfly, while Liam and Eva strolled hand in hand, letting the moment settle between them. Do you ever think, Eva said quietly, how strange it is that everything fell apart, only to bring us here? I do, Liam said, and I'm starting to believe that sometimes, falling apart is the only way to rebuild the life you were meant to have. That evening, they returned home. There was no lavish party, no headlines, just dinner around the kitchen table, pasta, salad, and Ava's lemon cake that Liam always claimed was dangerous. They danced in the living room afterward, Noah insisting they play his favorite song on loop. Later, after tucking Noah into bed, Liam joined Eva on the back porch. The stars stretched far above them, vast and unburdened. She leaned against his shoulder, her fingers laced with his. You know, she murmured, for a long time, I thought we were cursed. And now, he asked, now, I think we were, just, ... being prepared. For what? For this, a life we don't have to survive, one we get to live. He kissed her then, not with urgency, but with reverence, with the kind of knowing that comes only after you've lost and fought your way back. In the months that followed, they created a foundation, the Bennett Renewal Project, offering education, mentorship, and reintegration support for former inmates. It was Liam's vision, but Eva brought it to life, designing the spaces, choosing colors that evoked peace, hope, and second chances. Together, they spoke at conferences and schools, not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that love, when met with courage, could become a force of transformation. People listened not because they were perfect, but because they were real. In time, the shadows of Liam's past no longer haunted him. They became part of the soil from which something beautiful had grown. Years later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Liam watched Noah riding his bike down their street, strong, confident, free. Eva stood beside him, her hand resting on her growing belly. Their second child was on the way, and Liam felt the familiar weight of fear give way to joy. He turned to her, his voice low. How did we get here? Eva smiled. One choice at a time, and so they kept choosing. Every morning, every argument, every laughter-soaked night, they chose forgiveness, they chose healing, they chose love, not for what it once was, but for what it continued to become. Not perfect, not easy, but absolutely, unmistakably worth it. Liam Bennett was a man who once had everything: success, wealth, and the love of a brilliant woman named Eva. Together, they built a company, a future, and what seemed to be an unbreakable bond. But when secrets from his past came back to haunt him, dark truths and criminal ties, he could no longer ignore. Liam made the ultimate sacrifice. To protect Eva, he walked away from everything, even divorcing her without explanation, and turned himself in to pay for the life he thought he had buried. For 5 long years, Eva was left alone, pregnant, betrayed, and heartbroken. But instead of collapsing, she chose to rebuild. She raised their son Noah alone, turned pain into strength, and never allowed bitterness to define her. When Liam was finally released from prison, he expected nothing. But what waited for him was the very life he had feared he lost. A child who embraced him without question, and a woman who still saw the man beneath the scars. Through time, effort, and honesty, Liam reclaimed not just his freedom, but his role as a father, a partner, and a man reborn. Together, they didn't just fall in love again, they built a life rooted in truth, growth, and second chances. The lesson. This story is a powerful reminder that love is not defined by perfection, but by perseverance. Mistakes of ungrave ones do not have to be the end of the road. With accountability, vulnerability, and time, healing is not only possible, it can lead to something even stronger. In life, we all face setbacks. What matters is whether we let those moments define us or refine us. So ask yourself, when faced with pain, will you choose silence or transformation? Interactive question. If you were in Ava's place, would you give Liam a second chance? A. Yes, people can change if they take responsibility and grow. B. No, some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Comment your answer below, A or B, and tell us why. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment where forgiveness changed everything, or do you believe trust, once broken, is lost forever? Share your opinion in the comments so others can reflect with you. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful love stories and life lessons. Your support gives us the strength to create even more meaningful content. See you in the next chapter.